This bear cub couldn't stop smiling. The first time his video was shared, it was hard not to stare at that face. He had this giant goofy grin and these wild, like he was trying to tell the world, "I'm okay, I'm still hopeful." His fur was scruffy and uneven, his coat a little too matted, but that smile was undeniable. The caption said he'd been rescued on the edge of Coldwater Pass, found wandering dangerously close to a mountain road where logging trucks rushed by without slowing. No collar, no tag, no microchip, just that unmistakable expression of joy. The staff at the rescue center had posted the clip hoping it might help him find a home, but they didn't expect what happened next. A young man named Caleb was sitting on the floor of his cabin outside Bristlewood, scrolling through wildlife rescue updates like he did most evenings. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, but when that little face filled his screen, he froze. There was something in the way the cub looked at the camera, as if he was reaching through the glass, saying, "Come find me." And something in Caleb answered. The very next morning, Caleb drove 3 hours to the Alder Creek Wildlife Refuge. The staff greeted him politely, but with a hint of caution. People were often enchanted by the idea of wild animals without realizing the responsibility involved. But Caleb didn't come with wide-eyed excitement. He came with quiet certainty. "I'd like to meet the smiling bear cub," he said. They led him to a softly lit enclosure where the cub lay curled in a fleece-lined corner. He lifted his head, blinked with glacier-blue eyes, and slowly stood. His gait was a little unsteady, the kind of wobble that comes from days without proper food, but he walked right to the mesh and pressed his head against it as if he'd been waiting for Caleb to arrive. Caleb crouched down, barely breathing. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. The cub gave a small, rumbling huff, then pressed his nose to the wire, eyes half shut in contentment. That was enough. Caleb didn't ask to see any other animals. He didn't even ask for more information. He just said, "I'd like to start the adoption process." Because Alder Creek specialized in rehabilitating wildlife under special permits, Caleb had to go through a full approval process. Luckily, he was already licensed to care for wild animals and had several acres of land approved for sanctuary use. He had originally planned to take in a fox or maybe another raccoon, something familiar. But those plans fell away the moment the cub leaned against the mesh. His home already had 2 rescues, Rust, a one-eyed shepherd mix, and Boone, an old Newfoundland who moved at the speed of clouds. He wasn't sure how they'd react to a bear cub, but he figured they'd find a way. A week later, he returned to bring the cub home. The moment he stepped into the enclosure, the little bear let out a strange, joyous noise, half chuff, half squeak, and walked right into the crate without fuss. On the drive back, he curled into a ball and slept, his breaths deep and steady. Caleb named him Rowan. When they arrived, Rowan stepped out onto the porch and froze. His nose twitched as he sniffed the mountain air, ears swiveling toward every sound. Then, in a sudden burst, he bounded down the steps and zigzagged across the yard, tripping over his own paws. Rust watched from the porch, tail wagging slowly, uncertain. Boone stayed inside, his head resting on the couch arm. Rowan didn't charge at them, he circled first, moving in a wide arc before padding up to Rust. They touched noses. Rowan gave a soft chuff, then batted gently at Rust's ear and leapt backward, inviting chase. Rust took the bait, bounding after him in wide loops. Inside, Boone raised his head as Rowan approached. The cub stopped just short of Boone's massive paws, sniffed carefully, then lay flat on his belly in a gesture of trust. Boone sniffed him over, gave a low, approving rumble, and lowered his head again. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching a kind of silent agreement pass between them. The days that followed were a mix of discovery and mischief. Rowan had never seen a mirror before, and didn't like the stranger looking back at him. He spent 10 minutes pawing at his own reflection before stalking off in a huff. Ceiling fan shadows were another puzzle. He tried to catch them, hopping on his back legs like an oversized kitten. Stairs baffled him completely. The first attempt ended with a dramatic tumble back down. By the 3rd day, he was racing up and down like he'd been born to it. Rowan also learned to open the refrigerator, which was both impressive and dangerous. Caleb caught him trying to roll a whole pumpkin across the kitchen floor. The cub grunted in protest when the game was interrupted. It wasn't the last time Rowan tried to rearrange the pantry. He had a knack for pulling shoelaces from boots, hiding socks under the woodpile, and stealing Rust's tennis balls. But there were quiet moments too. At night, Rowan would climb into Caleb's lap, resting his head against his chest, his deep cub's rumble vibrating through them both. Sometimes Caleb woke to find him curled at the foot of the bed, paws twitching in some private dream. Rowan bonded with Rust almost instantly. They wrestled in the grass, napped side by side, and even shared toys. Boone accepted Rowan with quiet dignity, tolerating his playful nips and paw taps with the patience of someone who had long since stopped being surprised by anything. One afternoon, Caleb found Rowan perched on the windowsill, staring at the pine forest behind the cabin with an unblinking focus. A distant raven called, and Rowan answered, not perfectly, but close enough to make Caleb freeze. He had read that bears sometimes mimic sounds, but seeing it happen felt like witnessing a piece of the wild slipping into the room. That week, Caleb brought home a heavy-duty climbing post made from cedar logs, with ropes and platforms. Rowan attacked it like it was a rival, flipping backward once before returning to scale it again. Within days, it became his watchtower. From the top, he surveyed the living room like a little king. Rowan brought a pulse into that cabin, a rhythm that made the silence feel alive. Caleb began filming him, not for views, but to capture moments. A private folder on his laptop filled with clips, Rowan headbutting Rust, pawing at falling snow through the window, yawning like a tiny grizzly. One evening, on a whim, Caleb posted a short video of Rowan chasing bubbles in a shaft of sunlight. The cub's grin lit the whole scene. Within hours, the video was everywhere. Comments poured in. People marveled at how gentle and joyful a bear could be. Caleb replied to only one question, writing, "Rowan is wild-born. He isn't a pet. He's family. He's my responsibility. He's proof that with the right space, love, and time, even the wild can learn to trust again." Rowan didn't care about internet fame. What mattered was bubble time, and the joy on his face when Caleb returned from town. The cub would run to the door, chuffing, and rear up to press his front paws to Caleb's chest before dropping back down. When spring came, they hiked together. At first, Rowan wore a harness until he learned the trails. He followed Caleb's hand signals, pausing when told, bounding ahead only when it was safe. People they passed often stopped in astonishment. Once, a small boy whispered to his father, "That's a fairy bear." Caleb didn't correct him. Through the seasons, Rowan's coat grew thick and glossy, his legs strong. His spirit stayed light. He still pushed tennis balls under the couch just to cry when he couldn't reach them. He still tried to get Boone to play chase in the yard. When winter came, snow transformed Rowan. He rolled in it, leapt through it, and returned to the porch with a frosty beard, grinning like he'd uncovered buried treasure. He left little maps of paw prints all over the yard, a frozen trail of joy. One evening, after a day of games that left the living room scattered with chewed rope toys, shredded newspaper, and the kind of disorder only 3 animals can create, Rowan curled up between Rust and Boone in front of the fire. Caleb sat beside them, one hand resting gently on Rowan's back. The cub opened one eye, gave a sleepy huff, and pressed closer before drifting off. Caleb felt that sound settle inside him, like warmth spreading through cold hands. That was when he realized he hadn't just rescued a bear. Rowan had rescued something in him too. At first, it had been about keeping Rowan safe, feeding him, helping him heal. Caleb remembered those first few days with a sharpness that never faded. The soft rasp of Rowan's breathing when he was still too tired to play. The way his head would jerk up at every sound as if expecting trouble to walk through the door. Caleb had learned to move slowly, to speak softly, to keep his hands visible so Rowan would never be startled. Every meal placed in front of him was a quiet promise. "You're safe here. No one is going to take this away from you." But somewhere along the way, without fanfare or a single obvious moment, Rowan had begun giving back. At first, it was just glances that lingered a beat too long, as if he was studying Caleb for reasons beyond hunger or curiosity. Then came the light paw swipes, little invitations to play that carried no claws, only trust. Slowly, the tension in his body faded. His eyes stopped darting to the door, as if mapping an escape route. He began to sleep without fear, stretched out in a way that said he trusted the world, not to hurt him, while he dreamed. Rowan didn't just live in the cabin now, he filled it. Not just with laughter, and not just with trouble, though there was plenty of that, but with something harder to name. It was a reminder that joy can grow in the unlikeliest soil, that even something fragile and battered can take root and flourish if given light and care. Caleb had spent so long thinking of survival as the finish line. Rowan showed him it was just the beginning, that what comes after can be just as beautiful, if not more so. Caleb found himself laughing again, real belly laughs that surprised him with how easily they came. Even when Rowan scaled the Christmas tree and sat smugly in the branches as if he'd claimed it as his new throne. Even when Rowan tipped the laundry basket over and proudly scattered socks across the porch like he was decorating for some strange holiday. The little mischiefs were no longer frustrations. They were proof of life, proof that Rowan had claimed this place and everyone in it as his own. And it wasn't just Caleb who felt the shift. Rowan had changed Rust and Boone too. The old pair had always been steady and good-hearted, but Rowan brought out something softer in them. They became more protective, always keeping one eye on him. They slowed their movements when he was nearby, careful not to crowd him, and they gave up spots by the fire without complaint. Boone, who had never been one for sharing, now leaned back to let Rowan curl up against him. Rust, usually gruff, began to nudge Rowan gently with his nose in wordless reassurance. It was as if Rowan had rewritten the rules of their little family without ever trying to. Where once there had been quiet routines, there was now a kind of easy chaos, the good kind that makes a home feel alive. The cabin felt warmer in ways that had nothing to do with the fire in the stove. Some animals don't just find a home, they make one. Rowan's smile wasn't just a request for love, it was a gift, given freely, again and again, until it was woven into the very fabric of the place. It showed in the way Caleb caught himself talking to him as if Rowan might answer, in the way Rust and Boone instinctively stepped aside to let him through, in the way even the silences in the cabin felt full instead of empty. And now Rowan wasn't waiting to be seen. He wasn't looking for a door to slip out of or a reason to leave. His eyes didn't wander anymore. They stayed fixed on the life in front of him, on the people and friends who had become his pack. He was exactly where he belonged. He was home.